What are the two ways in which hanging achieves death?
These were the questions Christa Pike's legal team spent the day asking when trying to identify a judicial hanging expert.
More than 30 years before a Tennessee courtroom would hear testimony about how Christa Pike might be executed, this story began with the death of a 19-year-old woman. Her name was Colleen Slemmer. In January 1995, Colleen and Christa were both connected to the Job Corps program in Knoxville, Tennessee. Christa Pike was 18 years old. What happened between the young women would eventually become one of Tennessee's most notorious murder cases. Colleen was taken to an isolated area near the University of Tennessee campus. She would never return. Investigators soon began reconstructing her final hours. And their attention would turn toward Christa Pike and others who had been with Colleen that night. What police uncovered would lead to an arrest, a murder trial, and ultimately one of the most severe punishments available under American law. But nobody standing in that Knoxville courtroom 3 decades ago could have known that the case would still be making headlines in 2026. Or that 31 years later, another courtroom would be debating an extraordinary question. How should Christa Pike die? On the evening of January 12, 1995, witnesses saw Colleen Slemmer leave the Job Corps Center with 3 other students. Christa Pike, Christa's boyfriend, Tatterell Shipp, and another student, Shadala Peterson. Hours later, 3 of them returned. Colleen did not. The following morning, Colleen's body was discovered near the University of Tennessee's agricultural campus. Police now had a homicide investigation. But investigators would not have to wait long before attention turned toward the people who had been with Colleen the previous night. According to court records, Pike began telling other students that she had killed Colleen. 2 days after the murder, investigators interviewed Christa. She waived her rights and gave police a detailed statement describing her involvement. Then something even more important happened. Christa accompanied an investigator back toward the area and retraced the route from that night. She eventually directed him to the exact location where Colleen's body had been found. Investigators also recovered items belonging to Colleen. The evidence was building quickly. And soon, this was no longer simply a question of who had been with Colleen during her final hours. Police believed they knew who was responsible. Christa Pike was heading toward a murder trial. And prosecutors would ask a Tennessee jury for the ultimate punishment.
Pike is scheduled to be executed on September 30th for the brutal killing of a Knoxville Job Corps member in 1995 when Pike was 18.
Christa Pike was only 18 years old when Colleen Slemmer was killed. But when her case reached a Tennessee courtroom, prosecutors sought the death penalty. In 1996, a jury convicted Pike of first-degree premeditated murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The jury sentenced her to death. She also received a 25-year prison sentence for the conspiracy conviction. Christa Pike had become the youngest woman on death row in the United States at the time. Years passed. Appeals followed. Then decades passed. But the death sentence remained. Pike would eventually become Tennessee's only woman on death row. And in 2025, the Tennessee Supreme Court set a date for her execution. September 30th, 2026. After more than 30 years, the possibility of execution was no longer something far off in the future. It now had a date. But as that date moved closer, Pike's attorneys launched another legal challenge. This time, the central question wasn't whether a jury had convicted her. It was what Tennessee planned to do to her on September 30th.
Pike is scheduled to be executed on September 30th for the brutal killing of a Knoxville Job Corps member in 1995 when Pike was 18. Her team is pushing for alternative methods of execution, including hanging. citing the botched execution of Tony Carruthers. He was scheduled to die last month, but a doctor could not find a vein to administer the lethal injection. Pike's team also cites concerns over, quote, unique physical, medical, and psychological conditions, making her death torturous if she were to be executed under certain circumstances.
What percentage of judicial hangings are unsuccessful?
The botch rate for hanging is 3.12%. The botch rate for lethal injection is 7.2%, with the overall rate being 3.15%.
The defense argued a hanging requires simple tools like wood, rope, and nails. But the prosecution emphasized a successful hanging would need more specific tools like a trap door and specific rope placement.
If the calculations are incorrect, or if the ligature is not precisely placed, this could lead to strangulation instead of hanging. Did I read that right?
Hanging. In 2026, that word was now being discussed seriously inside a Tennessee courtroom. But Pike's attorneys were not arguing that she should simply be released from her death sentence. They were challenging the way Tennessee planned to carry it out. The state's current protocol calls for lethal injection using pentobarbital. Pike's lawyers argued that her particular medical conditions, including concerns about access and a blood disorder, could make that process especially painful and difficult. They pointed to problems Tennessee had experienced during another recent attempted execution, when officials were unable to establish the necessary access. And they proposed alternatives. One involved placing a central line. The other was far more unusual. Judicial hanging. Defense experts argued that a properly performed hanging could result in rapid unconsciousness and presented statistics suggesting a lower historical botch rate than lethal injection. But the state pushed back. Tennessee officials argued that the state has no hanging protocol, no equipment for carrying one out, and that hanging itself carries serious risks if performed incorrectly. So the courtroom was now confronting an extraordinary question. Not whether Christa Pike had been sentenced to death, but whether the method Tennessee planned to use could subject her to an unconstitutional risk of severe suffering. And both sides brought experts to court to answer.
If the calculations are incorrect, or if the ligature is not precisely placed, this could lead to strangulation instead of hanging. Did I read that right?
Correct.
Only 3 states still list hanging as a method of execution, including New Hampshire if the commissioner finds it impractical to use lethal injection, Washington if a prisoner requests it, and Delaware if that person's offenses occurred within a certain time frame.
But some people document that people, dance, quote, dance on the rope while they're hanging and they're strangling. So I think that would be more of a significant painful and anxious way to die.
The hearing is still ongoing, but if Pike is executed, she will be the first woman executed in Tennessee since 1819 and the first person executed who was 18 at the time of their crime in Tennessee since the death penalty was reinstated in 1972.
Thank you, Caitlin.
More than 3 decades after Colleen Slemmer was killed, the legal battle surrounding Christa Pike continues. Pike remains on Tennessee's death row, with her execution scheduled for September 30, 2026. Her attorneys are challenging the state's planned method of execution, while Tennessee continues to defend its ability to carry out the sentence. Now, the court must decide what happens next. For Christa Pike, that decision could determine how, or whether, the state carries out an execution that has been pending for more than 30 years. But behind every argument about lethal injection, medical procedures, and alternative execution methods is the reason this case began. Colleen Slemmer was 19 years old. Her life ended in January 1995, and her family has lived with that loss ever since. 31 years later, the courtroom arguments continue. And with September 30th approaching, the final chapter of this case has not yet been written. Thank you for watching StoryForge. Subscribe for more true cases, investigations, and major courtroom developments.